Fancy new binder holder here. Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you're welcome here. I'm Laura Wink, your worship associate for this morning, and our service will be led by Reverend Dick Gilbert. The service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel, and we plan on continuing that with hybrid worship services throughout the church year, so you can join us each week here in person, on Zoom, or later on YouTube as you prefer. If this is your first visit, welcome. We're glad you're here. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway, and whether it's your first visit or your 1,000th, we are glad that you came today. There are a few announcements to share with you today. RE and childcare will be provided this morning by Reverend Eileen and Kaya Mells. If you have joys and sorrows to share, please fill out a card and place it in the basket on the welcoming table. And if you missed the table on your way in this morning, it's okay to go back and grab your card right now or before the end of the first hymn and fill it in. We have a new system for people to volunteer to help on Sunday mornings. It's a helper card, and it's hung on in the back of the sanctuary on a magnetic board with roles that need filling. If you see an available task that you know you could help with, like being an usher to collect the offering or making coffee, pull the task off the board and place it in the basket below so that we know that someone's taking care of it. The tasks with green are good ones for the children to help with. There's also a sheet to sign up in advance for Sunday worship roles on that table, so please stop by and sign up. The donation drive for asylum seekers is happening this month. Please bring your donations to the church lobby and Dorothy will arrange delivery. You can contact Dorothy at dorothy.hoskins@gmail.com for information to let her know that you're dropping things off. You can also find more details on what to donate on the flyer in the back of the church or in the weekly email. And I think we have a number of announcements.
I have a couple of announcements. The first is that Reverend Gilbert has a new book out. It is called Growing Up Absorbed, Religious Education Among the Unitarian Universalists. And we have brand new copies available on the back table. They are $10, and if you'd like to follow up more after today's sermon. Second is we have an unusual occurrence today. Years ago, the minister Chip Wright, who was minister here, we would sing a hymn. It's number 318 called We Would Be One, and his father had written the words of that hymn. Today we have an even closer connection because our closing hymn, number 322 today, the words were written by Reverend Gilbert and his wife Joyce. So we have a little something unusual, and we hope you enjoy it.
Are there any other announcements for the good of the community? Okay. As we prepare to be fully together, I remind us all to silence our cell phones and anything that beeps or buzzes. We now enter a space of worship. Now is the time in our service for chalice lighting. I think we have a volunteer who might be in the wiggle zone. Okay. Well, you might. Please join us as, I don't know, you're gonna be able to do all this. I invite us to join with me in our chalice lighting words as a flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith with joy and sorrows, gifts and needs, relentless beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. It's always good to be with this crowd, Canandaigua crowd. I'm a graduate of Canandaigua Academy, class of '54. And if you go to the Fort Hill Performing Arts Center, that's where I graduated from high school. So I have a real loving connection with the chosen spot. Always there is a new beginning. Always there's the opportunity to begin anew. Always there is the chance to fashion a new day. Always there is the unfinished business of living. Always there are things to be learned. Always there is a possibility of a fresh start. Always there is a new beginning. May we prepare our hearts and minds and souls to accept the gift with greatness, gladness, and gratitude. Amen. Our opening hymn is one of my favorites, Rick Maston. How many of you are old enough to remember Rick Maston? Oh, a few. Rick was a troubadour minister in our movement, and he wrote this wonderful hymn, Let It Be a Dance, number 311, in Singing the Living Tradition.
Time for joys and sorrows. We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. Know that wherever your heart is holding today, whatever your heart is holding today, whether shared or not, we are with you. Danielle is going, you already collected them? Now it's time for us.
This is the year 5784 in the Jewish calendar. We have passed already Rosh Hashanah, one of the Jewish high holy days, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is coming up very soon. And so the story for all ages today is a story from the Hebrew tradition, which I think has strong Unitarian Universalist leanings. A man had been wandering about in the forest for days, not knowing which way was the right way out. Suddenly he saw a man approaching him, and his heart was filled with joy. Now I shall find out certainly the right way, he thought to himself. When they neared one another, he asked the man, "Brother, tell me which is the right way, for I have been wandering about in the forest for several days." Said the other to him, "Brother, I do not know the right way out either, for I have been wandering about here for many days. But this I can tell you, do not take the way I have been taking, for that will lead you astray. And now let us work for a new way together." Rabbi Hayan said, "So it is with us. One thing I can tell you, the way we have been following, that we can no longer continue to follow. For that one way leads astray, but for us, we can look together to find the right way." End of story. We are finding the right way together.
Now is the time in our service to join together in the spiritual practice of generosity. Our gifts of both time and money support our church and its work. Each week, we'd like to spotlight a group or committee and thank them for their gift of time. And this week, the group that we're going to thank is the Pastoral Care Team. Under the direction of Reverend Eileen, members of the team reach out to members of our congregation and friends in their time of need. If you would like to get involved with the Pastoral Care Team, please reach out to Reverend Eileen. Thank you. And we will now collect our offerings. I forgot to turn the page. 1/4 of our plate collection for the harvest season goes to the Friends of Ganondagan, who support this national historic landmark and the only New York State historic site dedicated to a Native American theme. The culture, art, agriculture, and government of the Seneca people influenced our modern understanding of equality, democratic government, women's rights, ecology, and natural foods. You gave to this morning's offering. Thank you very much by placing cash or a check into the basket, or one of the options that was posted on the screen. And please, I hope that you made a note that this was for today's offering. Now is the time for joys and sorrows. Let's just skip ahead. We have one sorrow to share. This is from Pat, Bill, and Kaya Mells, who are holding joy in the life of their German daughter, Linda, who passed away 1 year ago today. I will now drop a stone for these and all the joys and sorrows left in the silence of our hearts. Whatever is in your heart today, we are with you. Now we send our children.
Children would like to go to RE and join Reverend Eileen. This would be a great time. And we'll sing you out. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May God's love of all surround you everywhere, everywhere you may
I invite you now to get comfortable in your chairs, to take a deep breath, to put aside the woes of the world, which are many, and to join me in the spirit of meditation. Between the rising of the curtain, birth, and the falling of the curtain, death, there is the play, both precious and precarious, of smiles through tears, of loves loved and lost, of death and life despite death. Between the expectant hush of the audience at curtain time and its burst of acclaim or disapproval at play's end, we cavort back and forth across the stage. Now in the glow of the footlights, now in the shadows beyond the curtains. All we can be sure of is that the curtain for us has risen, and just as surely will one day fall. May the play and our part in it be worthy of applause. Let us be silent together. Amen. An announcement to this congregation. Artificial intelligence, AI, was not part of this service. Any intelligence or lack thereof displayed is strictly my own, and I claim it. A tisket, a tasket. A computer blew its gasket. A tisket, a tasket. What is there to ask it? I wrote a letter to my life, and on the way, I lost it. The words of the poet Chad Walsh. Sermons are a kind of letter to my life and to yours. I title this particular letter, Growing Up Absorbed. In the 1960s, a social critic, Paul Goodman, wrote a book, Growing Up Absurd, in which he saw the meaningless life that many adolescents felt as they gazed into a corrupt and increasingly technological culture. A very pessimistic book. One of my seminary professors, the late Robert Cope, parodied Goodman with a life-affirming, growing up absorbed. His thesis, the antithesis of Goodman's cynicism, was that life is a fascinating, yes, exciting adventure. And I liked Cope's hopeful expression and have borrowed it for the title of the book that's already been mentioned to you, Growing Up Absorbed. Now, this absorption that I have in mind is not the self-absorption that marks so much of our culture and political life, for that matter. The absorption I celebrate is summed up in my mission statement, my personal mission statement, which is to grow a soul, to love and to be loved, and to help repair a broken world. Being a Unitarian Universalist in 2023, or any year, is a unique adventure of the Spirit. Very absorbing business. By absorbed, I mean to include, to incorporate as a part of the self, to be intensely engaged in, engrossed in the life of the world, with all its dimensions. I think of Walt Whitman's poem, A Child Went Forth. It was a 19th century picture of a child with an ordinary kind of day, kind of a romanticized version of that child's life. But I was especially taken with the final lines of that poem, A Child Went Forth. After enumerating all the adventures this child had, ordinary adventures of seeing and hearing and being, Whitman wrote, "These became part of that child who went forth every day and who now goes and will always go forth every day. The same is true of us. We become what we experience." Well, liberal religious educators and ministers have for years tried to help people grow religiously. How do we do that? Well, to the extent that we do that, of course. I believe that what happens is what I call spiritual osmosis. Now for your scientific lesson of the day. Osmosis is the chemical, biological process. You'll be asked to recite this at the end of the service, by the way. By which molecules of a solvent tend to pass through a semi-permeable membrane from a less concentrated solution into a more concentrated one, thus equalizing the concentrations on each side of the membrane. Got that? Thank you. Good. Taking a few liberties with this scientific description, I would define spiritual osmosis as that human process by which values, convictions, and meanings are passed from one generation to another, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly. It is how a baby learns basic trust in the universe. And it can be how an elder takes stock of a life lived. It happens everywhere, but most especially, at least we hope, in church. Poet Adrian Rich provides words for understanding this process of faith development. One of my favorite poems. No one ever told us we had to study our lives, make of our lives a study, as if learning natural history or music, that we should begin with the simple exercises first and slowly go on trying the hard ones, practicing till strength and accuracy became one with the daring to leap into transcendence. Take the chance of breaking down in the wild arpeggio, of faulting the full sentence of the fugue. And in fact, we can't live like that. We take on everything at once before we've even begun to read or to mark time. We're forced to begin in the midst of the hardest movement, the one already sounding as we are born. This same seminary professor, Robert Cope, assigned our religious education class to write an essay titled A Theology of Toilet Training. We suspected the long academic year had just become too much for Bob, but soon discovered that he was quite serious. Mercifully, a few weeks later, he dropped that particular assignment, but I'm a little bit disappointed that he did so. At first blush, it may seem somewhat strange as a theological topic, but there is a wisdom in it. Theology comes out of the tough and tender experiences of life. It is not created de novo, as if someone simply sits down and writes it out. It is created out of the experiences of people as a group and people as individuals. Theology is a product of this existential experiencing of a person and a people. And I suggest that toilet training is a very existential experience, having had 2 sons. So religion has to do with human hope and suffering, pain, and joy. The very stuff of life. This is no less true of children than of adults. Take this story from the pen of one of our religious educators, Sophia Lyon Foz. I'm beginning here to move into the stages of life. One Sunday morning, a professor from a foreign country was visiting a class of junior high boys and girls at Riverside Church, New York City, where Foz taught. When the class hour was nearly over, the teacher asked the visitor if he would say a few words. In response, he told of his keen interest in all he had heard, but he said, "This is all very different from the way we do in our country. There we teach the boys and girls the catechism." "What is that?" asked one of the members of the class. He explained, and when he finished, one of the boys said thoughtfully, "Professor, that is perhaps all very well in your country, but it wouldn't work with us. It seems to me you are setting up a kind of ladder, but it has only one rung, and that's at the top. It's all right if you can reach that far." Religious education, or faith development as we tend to call it these days, is not a ladder with one rung at the top. It is a ladder with many steps, and we are invited to climb as high as we might. We build a credo rather than accept catechism. And building a theology in a religious community is far different from learning a catechism provided by that community. That is the genius of the faith that does not presume to have all the answers, but suggests some of them. This means that liberal religion is more a process than a destination, more a journey than a point to travel. Two very different illustrations. When I served as parish minister of the First Unitarian Church of Rochester, the Minister of Education and I taught a class called Religion and Life. It was for high school, mainly younger high school students. The culmination of the class was a field trip to Boston, and if you can imagine two leaders taking 24 young teenagers to Boston for 4 days and getting them back safely, you can imagine how exciting it was. Very exciting. But one of the highlights of that tour was a gift that this class presented to me. It was a t-shirt, and I still wear it. The logo was, "Life is a journey, not a guided tour." Exactly the point. Or take the case of 11-year-old Sandra Cisneros as she celebrated her 11th birthday. What they don't understand about birthdays and what they never tell you is that when you're 11, you're also 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 6 and 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 until 1. And when you wake up on your 11th birthday, you expect to feel 11, but you don't. You open your eyes and everything is like yesterday, only it's today. And you don't feel 11 at all. You feel you're still 10, and you are underneath that year that makes you 11. Because the way you grow old is kind of like an onion, or like the rings inside a tree trunk, or like my little wooden dolls that fits one inside the other, each year inside the next one. That's how being 11 years old is. Sandra is already at 11, deeply absorbed in life with a deep understanding of faith development. With all of our teaching of reason in religion, with all our attempts to help youth feel a part of something larger than themselves, with all our efforts to give people the urge to serve and save the world, do we fail them if we do not take them into all these experiences of growing up? It is wrestling with these doubts and these insights that religious education is all about. Just look at the educational ineptness of Florida, where children of all races are not allowed to look into the past because they might feel uncomfortable. Well, being uncomfortable, Governor DeSantis, is a part of growing up. I have come to think of the middle stages of life as middlescence, and referring again to my late friend, troubadour minister Rick Maston, he reflected somewhat melancholy and ambivalent feelings in a sports metaphor with his poem, The Second Half. I turned 40 a while ago and came dribbling out of the locker room, ready to start the second half. Glancing up at the scoreboard, I saw that we were behind 7-84. And it came to me that we ain't going to win. And considering the score, I'm beginning to be damn glad that this particular game ain't going to go on forever. But don't take this to mean I'm ready for the showers. Take it to mean I'm probably going to play one hell of a second half. I told this to some kids in the court next to mine, and they laughed. But I don't think they understood. How could they? Playing the first quarter, only 1 point behind. Rick Maston understood religion as an ongoing process with changing perspectives. Another story from Harvard this time, from Harvard Divinity School, where a professor noted that one of his students was going to write her memoirs at 30. Decided to write the memoir at that age. She spent the next 15 years in the process. At 45, she determined that she had left a great deal out, and so she spent the next 30 years refining the project. At 75, she found herself immobilized by the mountains of paper in her house. She concluded that nothing had happened since she began her memoir. She was right. Her whole life was on hold. I'm starting to sketch out my own memoir, but I'm making very slow progress because life keeps getting in the way. There's a danger that in our over-examining and recording our experiences, we will forget to live it, to live life. We've been brought up to take on the maxim of Socrates: the unexamined life is not worth living. But I suggest an antithesis, not original to me, but I think quite appropriate. The unlived life is not worth examining. When I was president of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers and Retired Ministers and Partners Association, or MAPA, I was brought face to face with colleagues who were, and their partners who were in the autumn and winter of their lives and careers, and had occasion, because we meet in regular sessions, it's mostly on Zoom these days, and to reflect on the meaning of what has gone before and the meaning of what is to come. One of the favorite maxims of retirement that came out of RMAPA was this: retirement is in 3 stages: go-go, slow-go, and no-go. The trouble is, I have a hard time deciding where I am. I have a heart flutter now, AFib, familiar probably to many of you. I just had cataract surgery. My poor old body, which played quarterback at Canandaigua Academy, is slowly breaking down. So in one of my columns in our quarterly newsletter, Elderberries, I paraphrased young Sandra Cisneros, applying her wisdom to retirement. Here's what I wrote: what they don't understand about retirement, and what they never tell you, is that when you're 65, you're also 64 and 63 and 62 and 61 and 60 and so on. And when you wake up on your first day of retirement, you expect to feel retired, but you don't. You open your eyes and everything's just like yesterday, only it's today. And you don't feel retired at all. You feel like you're still working, and you are, underneath the year that makes you retired. because the way you retire is kind of like starting a new career, but with no coffee breaks, no days off, no vacations, no sabbaticals, and no salary. It is a full-time job. You give all your time and energy to it. That's how being retired is. So as I become absorbed in my elderhood, I find inspiration in the possibly apocryphal story of the painter Paul Cézanne. For 35 years, Cézanne lived in obscurity. He did his painting, but he gave his paintings away to friends, not thinking there was anything special about them. It was just his expression of beauty in the world. So he never sought any kind of recognition until one day a Parisian art collector saw his paintings and felt they were pretty good, and so created the first Paul Cézanne exhibit. The world was astonished to discover the presence of a master, and the master was just as astonished. Shortly after the exhibit opened, Cézanne, on the arm of his son, arrived at the gallery, and he could not contain his amazement as when he saw his paintings on display, and turning to his son, he said, "Look, they have framed them." The image of framing fascinates me. Retirement and old age are, to a considerable extent, about framing. They give us that rare opportunity to step back and see where we have been and what we have accomplished and what we have lost. It provides us even a cosmic perspective. I tried to put myself in Cézanne's shoes. He was an old man. He painted for the love of the painting and what he created. His hands were a little unsteady now. His best painting probably was behind him. But after all these years, someone had thought they were good enough that they should be framed. What an overwhelming sense of joy he had when he had his paintings framed, and I would say his life as well. And so we have seen the various stages of development along the life cycle and how absorbing this path of faith development can be. From a theology of toilet training to a child who understands there are many rungs on the ladder of growth, to the middle-aged basketball player constantly playing from behind, checking the scoreboard as he went, and finally to an artist who marveled that his paintings had been framed. As one of my colleagues put it, a lifetime is all too short a time to learn who we are and what we could be. All too short to learn the lessons life has to teach us. All too short to learn what love is all about. A tisket, a tasket. The computer blew its gasket. A tisket, a tasket. What is there to ask it? I wrote a letter to my life, and on the way, I lost it. Every day we write letters to our lives. May we not lose the joy of that writing. May we find each and every day an adventure as we continue the process of growing up absorbed. So be it. Amen. Growing up is absurd and absorbing. The almost absurd transformation from infancy to senility, from innocence to wisdom, from birth to death. The absorbing reality of choosing a life and a way to live it and to give it. Growing passion and compassion as arms and legs of the soul. Creating community, moving from me to we. Committing one's life to something that will outlast it. Growing up is absurd and absorbing. So be it. Our final hymn is number 322. Thanks be for these.
Please join me in our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.